The girl says to the billionaire, "Hi sir, my mother has a ring just like yours and the billionaire." Under the glittering chandeliers of the Starlight Pavilion, James Parker stood alone, a glass of untouched champagne in his hand. The annual charity gala buzzed with the city's elite, their laughter and chatter echoing off the marble walls. At 45, James had everything money could buy except the one thing that had haunted him for 2 decades: his sister's whereabouts. The ornate family ring on his finger caught the light, drawing his attention. It was identical to the one he had given Chloe on her 16th birthday, just months before she vanished. The memory stung like an open wound. From across the room, Max, his aging German shepherd, lay quietly by the entrance. Despite strict event policies, no one dared question the presence of James Parker's dog. Max had been Chloe's closest companion, and after her disappearance, the only living connection James had to his sister. Now 15 years old, Max still perked up at any mention of Chloe's name. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. "Mr. Parker, your speech about underprivileged youth is scheduled in 10 minutes," an event coordinator whispered, breaking his reverie. James nodded, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit. The success of his law firm and philanthropic work had made him a billionaire, but the emptiness in his life seemed to grow with each passing year. Every charity event, every donation, every scholarship program, all were attempts to atone for his failure to protect his sister. Max suddenly raised his head, ears alert. James followed his dog's gaze to a small figure weaving through the crowd. A little girl, no more than 6, clutched a worn teddy bear, her eyes wide with wonder at the opulent surroundings. Something about her struck him, perhaps the way she moved, or the familiar curve of her smile. The girl approached him without hesitation, her innocent curiosity a stark contrast to the calculated networking of the adults around them. Max, usually indifferent to strangers, stood and walked slowly toward her, tail wagging gently. "Hi, sir," she said, looking up at him with bright eyes. "My name's Lily. Your ring looks just like my mummy's." James felt his heart stop. Max whined softly, pressing closer to the child. "Your mother has a ring like this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The family ring was unique, crafted by their grandmother with a distinctive blue stone and intricate engravings that told their family history. "Aha," Lily nodded enthusiastically. "She never takes it off. She says it's magic and helps her be brave when things are hard." She reached out to pet Max, who nuzzled her hand affectionately. "Your dog is so nice. He feels familiar." James knelt down to her level, his mind racing. "Where is your mother, Lily?" "She's working at the hospital. She's a nurse." Lily hugged her teddy bear closer. "Sometimes she cries when she looks at the ring, but she won't tell me why." Max's behavior, the ring, the girl's familiar features, it was too much to be coincidence. 20 years of dead ends and false hopes had taught James to be cautious, but he couldn't ignore the way his hands trembled or the way Max seemed to recognize something in this child. Lily. "There you are," a woman's voice cut through the crowd. Sarah, one of the event volunteers, hurried toward them. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Parker. She was supposed to stay in the children's area." But James barely heard her. His attention was fixed on Max, who had positioned himself protectively between Lily and Sarah, his behavior utterly confusing. In 20 years, James had never seen his dog act this way. "It's quite all right," he managed, standing up. "Lily was just telling me about her mother's ring." Sarah's face paled slightly, her hand instinctively moving to shield Lily. "We should go. The children's program is about to start." As they turned to leave, Max let out a soft whimper, his eyes following Lily. The little girl waved goodbye, her teddy bear clutched tight, leaving James with 1,000 questions and a familiar ache in his chest. He looked down at his ring, then at Max, who still stared after Lily. "What do you know, old friend?" he whispered. What are you trying to tell me?" Behind him, the event coordinator approached again, reminding him of his speech. But James Parker's mind was already elsewhere, piecing together a puzzle 2 decades in the making. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows of James Parker's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the meticulously organized desk. Headlines from 20 years ago were spread before him: "Prominent family's daughter missing, search continues for Chloe Parker." No leads in Parker disappearance. Each yellowed clipping was a reminder of his greatest failure. Max lay at his feet, grey around the muzzle now, but still maintaining his vigilant watch. The old dog had been through everything with them, from the day James surprised Chloe with the puppy on her 13th birthday, to the night she disappeared, to every fruitless search since then. Now, in his twilight years, Max still perked up at every young woman who resembled Chloe, though those moments had grown rarer. "Another dead end," Max James murmured, adding a new file to the ever-growing stack of private investigator reports. His fingers traced the family ring identical to the one he'd given Chloe. The blue stone caught the light, sending scattered reflections across the wall. 20 years of searching, and we're no closer to finding her. Rising from his desk, James walked to the window overlooking the city he'd conquered. Parker Associates occupied the top floors of the building, a testament to his meteoric rise in corporate law. Legal journals praised his brilliant mind, business magazines celebrated his philanthropy. To the world, James Parker was the definition of success, the man who built an empire from nothing. But they didn't see the empty mansion he returned to each night, or the way he obsessively checked his security cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of his sister. They didn't know about the trust fund that still grew, waiting for Chloe's return, or the birthday cards he wrote each year, stored in a drawer she might never open. Max's sudden bark drew his attention. The dog had risen, ears alert, staring at the framed photo on James's desk, the last picture taken of Chloe. She was 16, laughing as she hugged Max, the family ring glinting on her finger. Hours after that photo, she vanished without a trace. "I know," boy James knelt beside his aging companion, scratching behind his ears. "I miss her too." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Parker, the board is waiting in the conference room." "Thank you, Linda. I'll be right there." He straightened his tie, donning the mask of the confident attorney. But before he left, he paused at his private safe, entering the combination with practiced ease. Inside lay the evidence of his obsession: police reports, private investigator files, and a small box containing items from Chloe's room, her diary, which revealed nothing about her plans to leave, a half-empty bottle of her favorite perfume, and a handful of photographs. The most painful item was a crumpled note he'd found in her trash can. "I'm sorry, James. I can't stay. Please don't look for me." But he had looked. Every spare moment, every resource at his disposal had been devoted to finding her. The search had cost him relationships, burned bridges, and earned him a reputation for being obsessed. His father, before his death 5 years ago, had called it a waste of time and money. She made her choice, the old man had said bitterly. Let her live with it. But James couldn't let go, not when Max still waited by the door each night, as if expecting Chloe to walk through it. Not when he saw her face in every crowd, heard her laugh in every busy restaurant, felt her absence at every family holiday he now spent alone. His phone buzzed another text from his latest private investigator. "No matches on the ring inquiry. All jewelers confirm it's one of a kind." Of course it was. Their grandmother had commissioned it specifically for their family, creating 2 identical pieces with rare blue stones. One for James, one for Chloe. The rings were meant to keep them connected, a symbol of their bond. Now it was just another dead end in an endless search. Max whined softly, pressing against his leg. The dog's loyalty had never wavered, even as his steps had slowed and his muzzle had grayed. In many ways, Max was the only one who truly understood the depth of James's loss. The dog had been there the night Chloe left, had tracked her scent to the bus station before losing it. For months afterward, Max had waited by her bedroom door, refusing to believe she wouldn't return. "Come on," old friend James patted Max's head. "Time to play our parts." Together they walked to the conference room, where James would once again transform into the brilliant, ruthless attorney his clients expected. He would argue cases, win settlements, and build his empire higher, all while carrying the weight of his sister's absence like a stone in his chest. But something had changed. The little girl at the gala, Lily, with her innocent mention of her mother's ring, had awakened something in him. And Max's strange behavior, the old dog had sensed something, recognized something. After 20 years of false hopes and dead ends, James felt a familiar stirring in his chest, hope, dangerous and bright, refusing to be ignored. He touched his ring one last time before opening the conference room door. "We'll find her," Max, he whispered. "Whatever it takes, we'll bring her home." The aging dog wagged his tail once, as if making a promise of his own. Together they stepped into the room, carrying their secret burden, their shared mission, their undying hope for a reunion that seemed more possible now than it had in 20 years. In a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, Sarah Matthews stood at her kitchen window, absently twisting the blue-stoned ring on her finger. The early morning light caught its distinctive engravings, sending a familiar pang through her chest. Behind her, the sounds of Lily getting ready for school filled the small space with life. "Mummy, can you braid my hair like yesterday?" Lily called out, her voice carrying the same musical lilt that Sarah remembered from another time, another life. Sarah turned from the window, forcing a smile. Of course, sweetheart, her fingers moved automatically through the familiar motions of braiding, while her mind drifted to the charity gala 2 nights ago. The sight of James Parker, his identical ring, and that old dog had nearly stopped her heart. She had thought they were safe here, in this quiet town where nobody asked too many questions. The apartment walls held their secrets well, photos carefully edited, documents hidden away, a life meticulously constructed to protect the precious child who knew nothing of her true heritage. On the surface, they were just another small-town family, Sarah, the hard-working nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, and her daughter Lily, beloved by everyone in their tight-knit community. "All done," Sarah announced, tying off the braid. "Now hurry up, Mrs. Henderson is waiting to walk you to school." Lily grabbed her backpack, then paused at the shelf where a worn teddy bear sat. "Can I take Mr. Whiskers today? He's been lonely." The teddy bear, another relic from the past, carefully preserved. "Of course, but remember, be extra careful with him." "I know," Lily finished, hugging the bear close. "He's special because he's magic, just like your ring." Sarah swallowed hard. If only Lily knew how magical, how dangerous these connections to the past really were. "That's right, sweetie. Now scoot, you'll be late." After Lily left, Sarah sank into her favorite chair, the one that faced the door, and the window old habits died hard. The morning paper lay on the coffee table, James Parker's face staring up at her from the society pages. The article praised his latest charitable foundation, dedicated to finding missing children and reuniting families. The irony was almost too much to bear. But a knock at the door made her jump, but it was only Mrs. Chen from next door, bringing her usual morning coffee and concern. "You look tired, dear," the elderly woman said, settling into the opposite chair. "Another rough night shift." Sarah nodded, grateful for the simple explanation. Mrs. Chen had been the first to welcome them to the building 5 years ago, never questioning why a single mother might choose to live in a security building with 3 different locks on the door. The little one saw something interesting at that fancy party, Mrs. Chen continued, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "She hasn't stopped talking about the man with the magic ring like yours." But Sarah's hand instinctively covered her ring. Children have such active imaginations. Mrs. Chen's knowing look spoke volumes. She had been in America long enough to learn when not to ask questions, but her protective instincts were strong. You know, dear, sometimes running from the past only ensures it catches up with you later. I'm not running, Sarah protested weakly. But even as she said it, her eyes drifted to the emergency bag always packed and hidden in the hall closet. Mrs. Chen patted her hand gently. The community here, we take care of our own. Whatever shadows you're hiding from, you're not alone anymore. It was true. Over the years, the neighborhood had embraced them completely. The local shopkeepers who always had a treat for Lily, the teachers who never questioned why Sarah was so protective, the neighbors who formed an unofficial watch network, all of them created a protective cocoon around the little family. But would it be enough? Sarah's thoughts returned to the gala, to James Parker's penetrating gaze, and that old dog who had seemed to look right through her carefully constructed facade. Max, she remembered his name now. He had been just a puppy when... She shook her head, dispelling the memories. I should get ready for work. Mrs. Chen stood, but paused at the door. That ring, she said quietly. It carries a story, doesn't it? Sarah looked down at the blue stone, remembering the night it was given to her, the promises made, the sacrifices demanded. Every ring does. After Mrs. Chen left, Sarah moved through her morning routine on autopilot, her mind racing. They had been careful, so careful. New names, new histories, new lives built from scratch. But one chance encounter at a charity gala threatened to unravel it all. She opened her jewelry box, pushing aside the false bottom to reveal a faded photograph, two teenagers laughing, an energetic puppy between them, identical rings glinting in the sunlight. On the back, in faded ink, James Chloe forever. Sarah traced the faces in the photo, her heart heavy with the weight of secrets kept and promises made. I'm sorry, she whispered to the smiling girl in the photograph. I'm so sorry. The hospital would be expecting her soon. Another day of saving others while carefully guarding her own secrets. Another day of watching over her shoulder, of calculating risks, of protecting the precious life she'd sworn to defend. But as she locked her triple-bolted door, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their carefully constructed world was beginning to crack. James Parker had resources, determination, and now a reason to look closer. And that old dog Max had always been too smart for their own good. Time was running out. Soon she would have to make a choice: keep running, or face the past she'd spent so long trying to escape. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. The sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital seemed to stretch endlessly before James as he made his way through the maze of departments, Max padding quietly beside him. Despite hospital regulations, no one questioned the presence of the aging German Shepherd. James Parker's influence extended far and wide in this city. The nurse you're looking for? Sarah Matthews works in pediatrics, the department head had said, her eyes lingering on the substantial donation check James had presented earlier. 3rd floor, East Wing. Max's nails clicked against the linoleum floor, his nose working overtime, tracking something only he could sense. The old dog had been unusually alert since they'd arrived, his behavior reminiscent of those early days searching for Chloe. As they rounded the corner to pediatrics, Max suddenly froze, his ears perking forward. Through the ward's window, James caught sight of a familiar figure: Sarah, the volunteer from the gala, dressed in nursing scrubs, tending to a young patient. The ring on her finger caught the fluorescent light, its blue stone unmistakable. "Wait here," old friend James whispered to Max, straightening his tie. The dog whined but obeyed, settling into a watchful position. Sarah's back stiffened as he approached, though she hadn't turned around. Somehow she knew he was there. "Mr. Parker," she said quietly, finishing her notes before facing him. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Please call me James," he kept his voice casual, though his heart hammered in his chest. "I was making my monthly donation rounds and thought I'd stop by. That's quite an unusual ring you're wearing." Sarah's hand instinctively covered the ring, a gesture so familiar it made his throat tight. Chloe used to do the same thing when she was nervous. Family heirloom, she replied tersely. If you'll excuse me, I have patients to attend to. But Max had other ideas. The old dog, ignoring James's command, had made his way into the ward. He approached Sarah slowly, nose working, then sat at her feet and looked up with an expression James hadn't seen in 20 years, the same devoted gaze he used to give Chloe. Sarah's composure cracked, just for a moment. Her hand trembled as she reached down, stopping just short of touching Max's head. He seems to know you, James observed, watching her reaction carefully. I'm good with animals. Sarah withdrew her hand, stepping back. Mr. Parker, why are you really here? Before he could answer, a child's voice rang out. Max! Lily bounded down the hallway, still in her school uniform, clutching her teddy bear. The old dog's tail wagged furiously as she threw her arms around his neck. Lily, Sarah's voice held a warning note. You're supposed to be with Mrs. Henderson. She had to take a phone call, Lily explained, burying her face in Max's fur. He feels so familiar, Mummy. Like in my dreams. James watched as Sarah's face drained of color. Dreams. Aha. The ones with the lady who looks like me. She's always playing with a dog, just like Max. Sarah moved quickly, putting herself between Lily and James. Sweetie, why don't you go to the playroom? I need to speak with Mr. Parker. But Max wouldn't budge from Lily's side, his loyalty visibly torn for the first time since Chloe's disappearance. That bear, James said softly, noticing the worn teddy for the first time. Where did you get it? He's magical, Lily declared proudly. Mummy says he's been protecting me since I was a baby. James stepped closer, his heart nearly stopping as he recognized the distinctive stitching on the bear's left ear, his mother's handiwork, repairing Chloe's favorite toy after their father had tried to throw it away. Sarah, his voice was barely a whisper, we need to talk. Not here, she replied, her professional mask cracking further. Not now. Then when? Because that bear belonged to my sister. And that ring you're wearing? It's identical to this one because they were made as a pair. And my dog, who hasn't shown interest in anyone for 20 years, seems to know both you and Lily very well. Sarah glanced around the busy hallway, her expression haunted. Tonight. The coffee shop on Cedar Street after my shift. Come alone. I trusted you, Lily's small voice interrupted them. She was looking at her mother with confusion. You said the bear was from my real mummy. He is, sweetheart. Sarah knelt down, her voice breaking. He is. James watched the exchange, his mind racing. Max moved between them all, whining softly, his aged face showing the same confusion they all felt. The coffee shop, 8 o'clock. Sarah stood, gathering herself. But Mr. Parker, if you really care about Chloe, you'll be very careful about what you do next. She took Lily's hand, gently but firmly leading her away. Max watched them go, his tail drooping, before returning to James's side. You knew, didn't you? James murmured to his old friend. You knew all along. The dog's brown eyes held 20 years of secrets, of loyalty torn between two masters, of a truth too complex for words. James pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over his investigator's number, then stopped. Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. If she knew something about Chloe, one wrong move could send her running. Instead, he knelt beside Max, running his hand through the dog's graying fur. What do you think, old friend, could Lily be? Max's tail thumped once against the floor, his eyes fixed on the direction Sarah and Lily had gone. Sometimes, James realized, the most important answers weren't found in databases or private investigators' reports. They were hidden in the reactions of a loyal old dog, in a child's innocent words, and in the frightened eyes of a woman wearing his sister's ring. 8 o'clock couldn't come soon enough. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. James sat in his parked car outside the hospital, Max alert in the passenger seat, both watching the staff entrance. He'd cancelled all appointments, much to his assistant's dismay, unable to focus on anything but the mounting questions. Through his tinted windows, he observed Sarah during her breaks. Her movements were precise, controlled, but he noticed how she scanned her surroundings constantly, like someone used to being watched. Twice she'd received calls that left her visibly shaken. "She's scared," Max James murmured. "But of what? Or whom?" The old dog's ears twitched at every mention of Sarah's name. His behavior had changed dramatically since their hospital encounter. Gone was the listless retirement-age companion, replaced by the alert, protective animal of his younger years. James's phone buzzed another text from his private investigator Sarah Matthews. History only goes back 5 years. Before that, nothing. Classic signs of an identity change. He was about to reply when movement caught his eye. A man in a dark suit was photographing the hospital entrance with a professional camera. Tourist? Journalist. But something about his methodical movements set off alarm bells. Max growled low in his throat. "You see it too, don't you?" James started the car, keeping his distance as he followed the photographer. The man made several calls, his stance reminding James of the private investigators he'd hired over the years. But who else was investigating Sarah? The answer hit him with chilling clarity: his father's old associates. Even after death, Jonathan Parker's influence lingered like a dark cloud. Had they been watching all along? A commotion at the hospital entrance drew his attention back. Lily had arrived with her elderly neighbor, but something was wrong. The child was crying. The teddy bear clutched to her chest as Sarah rushed out to meet them. James rolled down his window, straining to hear. "Someone was asking questions at school," the elderly neighbor was saying, "about Lily's background. I got her out right away." Sarah's face went ash white. She scooped Lily up, whispering something in her ear that made the child nod solemnly. The teddy bear, Chloe's bear, dropped to the ground in their haste. Before he could think better of it, James was out of the car. Max followed, moving faster than his aged joints should allow. "You drop this," he called out, retrieving the bear. Sarah spun around, instinctively pushing Lily behind her. The elderly neighbor stepped forward protectively, her slight Asian frame somehow imposing. "Mr. Parker was just leaving," Sarah said firmly, but her hands were shaking. "Please," James held out the bear. "I'm not the one you should be afraid of." Max whined, pressing against Lily's legs. The child's tears had stopped, and she was looking between the adults with growing confusion. The man with the camera, James continued quietly. "He's not with me, but I think I know who he works for." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes: recognition, fear, resignation. "Mrs. Chen, could you take Lily inside? To the playroom." The elderly neighbor hesitated. "You sure, dear?" "Yes, Mr. Parker and I need to talk." Sarah waited until they were gone before turning back to James. "How long have they been watching?" "I'm not sure. My father had connections. Even after his death, some people remained loyal to him." "Your father," Sarah spat the word like poison. "Of course. I should have known he'd never stop looking." The pieces were starting to align, forming a picture James wasn't sure he wanted to see. "Sarah, who are you really? What do you know about my sister?" She glanced at the hospital entrance, then at her watch. "Not here. There are too many eyes. The coffee shop, like we planned." "No, now. That photographer wasn't just surveilling, he was documenting. If they found you." Max barked suddenly, his attention fixed on a dark sedan turning into the parking lot. Sarah's face drained of color. "Get Lily," she whispered. "Get her out of here. Take her to Mrs. Chen's apartment, 4 billion in the building on Maple Street. I'll create a diversion. I'm not leaving you here. You don't understand, her voice cracked. Lily is all that matters. Sarah stopped, shooting a meaningful look at the ring on his finger. She's the only thing that matters now. The sedan was getting closer. Max positioned himself between the car and the hospital entrance, his aged body tensed for action. Please, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. If you ever loved your sister, get Lily to safety. I'll meet you at Mrs. Chen's. The raw desperation in her voice made the decision for him. James whistled for Max, heading quickly into the hospital. Behind him, he heard Sarah engaging loudly with the sedan's occupants, her voice clearly creating a scene that would draw security's attention. He found Lily in the playroom, her small face lighting up at the sight of Max. Time for an adventure, he said, trying to keep his voice light. Your mum asked me to take you to Mrs. Chen's. The child studied him with unnervingly familiar eyes because of the bad men. What bad men, Lily? The ones Mummy says we have to hide from. Like in our drill, she stood, taking his hand trustingly. It's okay, I know what to do. And Max will protect us, right? The old dog pressed close to her side, his protection mode fully engaged. James felt a surge of emotion, pride, fear, determination. Right, he managed. Max will protect us. As they made their way out through the service entrance, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was repeating history, running, hiding, protecting. But this time he wouldn't fail. Whatever connection Lily had to Chloe, whatever dangers Sarah was facing, he would not lose them again. Max led the way, his nose working overtime, guiding them through back alleys and side streets. The teddy bear bounced in Lily's arms, its worn fabric holding secrets James was only beginning to understand. The time for questions would come later. Right now they had to run. If this story of love, sacrifice, and redemption has touched your heart, please consider subscribing to this channel. Like me searching for Chloe, every subscriber helps us share more stories that remind us of the power of family bonds. Mrs. Chen's apartment was a haven of calm amid the chaos, fragrant with jasmine tea and decades of accumulated wisdom. James sat at her small kitchen table, watching Lily sleep on the worn couch, Max keeping faithful guard at her feet. The ring you wear, Mrs. Chen said quietly, pouring more tea. I've seen its twin many times. Every morning Sarah twists it exactly 3 times before leaving for work. A habit born of anxiety, perhaps, or guilt. James's hand went to his own ring unconsciously. You know more than you're letting on. The elderly woman's eyes held years of carefully kept secrets. In my culture, Mr. Parker, we believe that some stories aren't ours to tell. But we also believe in signs. That old dog of yours, he recognized Lily the moment he saw her, didn't he? Before James could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from his investigator contained an old newspaper clipping he'd never seen before. Local nurse helps abuse victims escape. Sarah Chen Matthews establishes underground network. He looked up sharply. Chen. Mrs. Chen smiled sadly. My daughter. She died helping women and children escape their abusers. Sarah was her last case, arriving with a pregnant teenager who needed protection. That was almost 7 years ago. The timeline aligned perfectly. James's hands trembled as he pulled out his wallet, extracting a worn photograph. Was this the teenager? Mrs. Chen studied the photo of Chloe, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Parker, what would you do with such information? Your father's associates are already watching. One wrong move could destroy everything Sarah and others have sacrificed to protect. I need to know, James whispered, his voice raw. Is Lily? A key turned in the lock. Sarah burst in, disheveled but unharmed. Her eyes found Lily immediately, relief flooding her features. But when she saw the old newspaper clipping on the table, her face went pale. Mother, she addressed Mrs. Chen, you promised. "And I've kept that promise for 7 years," Mrs. Chen replied calmly. "But sometimes, daughter, the truth finds its own way out." Max rose from his position by Lily, moving to stand between Sarah and James, as if trying to bridge a gap 2 decades in the making. "It was you," James said quietly. "You helped Chloe escape." Sarah sank into a chair, the fight draining from her. "Your father, he was going to send her away. To fix her," he said. She was 17, scared and pregnant. The words hit James like physical blows. Pregnant. She didn't know who to trust. Your father had eyes everywhere, but she'd heard about the underground network, about a nurse who helped people disappear. Sarah's hand went to her ring, Chloe's ring. "She made me promise to keep it, to remember her by. I never meant to wear it, but Lily." She started asking questions about her mother, and it was the only piece of her I had to share. James struggled to process the implications. All this time you've been protecting them both. The network helped create new identities. Sarah Chen Matthews died in a car accident 6 years ago. I took her name to honor Mrs. Chen's daughter, became a nurse like her. She looked at the sleeping child. Lily doesn't know. She thinks I'm her adoptive mother. It was safer that way. Where is Chloe? The question that had haunted him for 20 years finally hung in the air. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. After Lily was born, she said it wasn't safe to stay together. Your father's men were getting too close. She left Lily with me, promising to return when it was safe." She pulled out a worn envelope. She sends letters sometimes through a complicated relay system. This arrived last week. James took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a short note and a recent photograph. Chloe looked different, darker hair, different name on the caption, but her eyes were the same. She was standing in front of a small bookstore, smiling. "The Three Sisters Bookshop," he read aloud. Max's head snapped up, a low whine escaping him. "You know it?" Sarah asked. "It's in Portland. I almost bought it last year as part of a development deal." James felt lightheaded. "She's been there all along." "Mr. Parker," Mrs. Chen interrupted gently. "The men who were at the hospital, they'll be looking for you now. And they'll be watching the bookstore." "Let them," James's voice hardened. "I'm done hiding. Done pretending I don't see what's happening. My father's dead, but his shadows still control us. No more." Sarah reached for Lily protectively. "You don't understand. Your father's associates, they're not just thugs. They're powerful people who believe they're protecting the Parker family legacy. If they find Chloe, they'll have to go through me first." James stood, decision made, through us. Max barked softly in agreement, his tail wagging for the first time since the hospital. Mother Sarah looked to Mrs. Chen. The elderly woman nodded slowly. "Sometimes, daughter, the only way to escape the shadows is to step into the light." But first she moved to a painting on the wall, removing it to reveal a hidden safe. "We'll need what Sarah Chen, my real daughter, left behind. Evidence. Names. Everything your father tried to bury." James watched as Mrs. Chen extracted a thick file, its contents promising revelations he'd spent 20 years seeking. But his eyes kept returning to Lily, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was about to change forever. "We protect her," he said firmly. "Whatever comes next, Lily stays safe." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then slowly removed Chloe's ring. "She should have this back, when we find her." Max padded over to Lily, resuming his protective position. The old dog had already made his choice, as he had 20 years ago, when he'd first sensed Chloe was in danger. This time they would all face the danger together. The contents of Mrs. Chen's file lay spread across the kitchen table, each document a damning piece of evidence against Jonathan Parker's empire. Police reports mysteriously buried, judges suddenly retiring, witnesses recanting a pattern of power and corruption spanning decades. Your father's reach went deeper than anyone knew, Sarah explained, her voice tight. The family legacy was built on silencing victims of abuse. Chloe wasn't the first to run, but she was the first to get away with proof. James stared at a particularly disturbing photograph, his father shaking hands with the police commissioner who'd handled Chloe's missing person case. The date stamp showed it was taken the day after the investigation was officially closed. I should have known, he whispered. All those years running my own investigations, hitting dead ends. They were watching, weren't they? Laughing at me. Max growled softly, sensing his mounting anger. They thought you were just a grieving brother, Sarah said. Your searches helped maintain the cover story that Chloe had simply run away. As long as you looked in the wrong places, it kept attention away from the truth. A small voice interrupted them. Why are you crying, Uncle James? They turned to find Lily awake, clutching her teddy bear. The title Uncle James hit him like a physical blow. She'd figured it out on her own. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they find out important things, he managed, opening his arms. She came to him without hesitation, climbing into his lap as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Is it about my real mummy, she asked, the one who looks like me in the dreams? Sarah made a choked sound. Lily, sweetheart. I know you're not my real mummy, Lily said matter-of-factly. But you're my mummy in here, she pointed to her heart. And now I have an uncle too. And Max, the old dog's tail, thumped at his name. A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. Mrs. Chen moved silently to her security monitor, then relaxed slightly. Detective Rivera, she announced. He was Sarah's, my daughter's partner. The detective who entered was grey-haired and weathered, his eyes widening at the sight of James. So it's true. The network's been compromised. What do you mean? Sarah stood protectively in front of Lily. There's chatter. Big movements. Someone high up must have recognized you at the hospital. James Rivera dropped a file on the table. They're mobilizing private security, bought cops, even some judges getting midnight calls. Whatever your father built, it's waking up. Then we wake up too, James said firmly. I have resources, influence. Your resources are probably being monitored, Rivera cut in. Your father's people have had 20 years to infiltrate your life. Why do you think none of your private investigators ever found anything? And the revelation stung, but James pressed on. Then we use their assumptions against them. They think I'm still the grieving brother searching in the wrong places? Fine. Let them think that while we move Chloe somewhere safe. It's not that simple, Sarah interjected. The bookstore, it's part of the network, if they're watching it. Then other victims are at risk, Mrs. Chen finished. Women and children who sought refuge, like Chloe. The weight of it all threatened to crush him. It wasn't just about finding his sister anymore, it was about exposing a system of abuse and corruption that had destroyed countless lives. Lily, still in his lap, reached up to touch his ring. It's like Mummy's, the one that makes her brave. James looked at the child, his niece, and felt something shift inside him. We've been playing defense for 20 years. Maybe it's time to attack. How? Rivera asked. By using their greatest weapon against them, reputation. James pulled out his phone. The Parker name still carries weight. What happens when the prodigal son publicly denounces his father's legacy? They'll destroy you, Sarah warned. Let them try. Every attack will only prove what we're saying. He looked at Rivera. How many cases did they bury? How many victims stayed silent because they thought no one would believe them? Hundreds, the detective answered grimly. Then we give them a voice. All of them. James hugged Lily closer. No more shadows. No more hiding. Max barked sharply, a warning. Through the window, they saw dark SUVs pulling up outside. Back exit, Mrs. Chen said calmly, moving to a bookshelf. The network built escape routes into every safe house. Sarah knows the way. Come with us, Sarah pleaded. The elderly woman shook her head. Someone needs to stay, make it look normal. Detective Rivera will back up my story about a routine visit. She moved to Lily, pressing something into her small hand. Keep this safe, little one. It's the key to everything. James recognized the USB drive identical to the one containing the evidence they'd just reviewed. Mrs. Chen, he started, but she cut him off. My daughter died protecting the truth. I'm not afraid to do the same. She straightened her spine. Now go. The passage leads to the old subway tunnels, and James, her eyes were fierce. Make them pay. Make them all pay. Sarah gathered Lily as Rivera positioned himself casually by the front door. Max was already at the secret entrance, his instincts guiding him. Before they slipped into the darkness, James heard Mrs. Chen starting her performance loud complaints about plumbing to the detective, her voice carrying clearly to anyone listening outside. In the tunnel, lit only by their phones, James felt Lily's small hand slip into his. Are we going to find my real mummy now? Yes, he promised. And then we're going to make sure no one has to hide ever again. Max led the way, his grey muzzle pointed forward, following a scent 20 years old but never forgotten. Behind them, they heard Mrs. Chen's voice fade, replaced by the echo of approaching footsteps. The hunt was on, but this time the hunters were about to become the hunted. The safe house was a modest cabin on the outskirts of town, its weathered exterior belying the sophisticated security system within. As night fell, James watched Lily sleep on the warm couch, Max standing guard as always. The scene stirred something deep within him, a fierce protectiveness he hadn't felt since Chloe was young. She has her mother's sleeping habits, Sarah observed softly, joining him by the window, always clutching that bear, one sock kicked off. The bear, James mused. I remember the day Chloe got it, our mother's last gift before he trailed off, the memory still painful after all these years. Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm. She told me about that day, said it was the last time she saw your father show any real emotion. The touch was comforting, unexpected. In the dim light, James noticed how exhausted Sarah looked, the weight of years of secrets etched on her face. Why did you do it? He asked. Take such risks for a stranger. Sarah's eyes drifted to Lily. Because 20 years ago, someone did the same for me. Mrs. Chen's daughter, the real Sarah, she saved me from my own nightmare. When Chloe came to the hospital pregnant and terrified, how could I not help? Max lifted his head, ears perking at a distant sound. Both adults tensed, but the dog soon relaxed, laying his head back down near Lily's feet. He's different with her, James noted. Younger somehow. Dogs sense things we can't, Sarah smiled. Maybe he's known all along who she really is. She twisted Chloe's ring absently. I never meant to wear it this long, but Lily. She was so curious about her mother. The ring became a way to keep Chloe present in her life. James studied her profile, seeing beyond the carefully constructed facade. You've been both mother and protector. That's no small thing. I've also been a liar, she whispered. Every birthday, every school event, every time she asked about her real mother. I told myself the lies were necessary, but they still hurt. You protected her, like I should have protected Chloe. Sarah turned to face him fully. James, you were barely more than a child yourself, your father. He was a monster, he finished, and I became complicit by staying silent, building my fortune on his foundation. No, Sarah's voice was firm. You built something different. Every charity, every case defending the vulnerable, you've been fighting him all along, even if you didn't know it. Their conversation was interrupted by a small whimper from Lily. The child was twitching in her sleep, caught in what seemed to be a nightmare. Max immediately nuzzled her hand, while Sarah moved to comfort her. But it was to James that Lily reached out, half asleep. "Uncle James, are the bad men gone?" He gathered her into his arms, surprised by how natural it felt. "We're safe here, sweetheart. Max is watching over us." "Like he watched over Mummy in my dreams?" Lily asked drowsily. James's heart clenched. "What dreams, Lily?" "The ones where she's young, like me, playing with Max in a big garden. But then the scary man comes, and she has to run away." Lily snuggled closer. "But it's okay now. We'll find her, right?" "Right," he managed, meeting Sarah's tearful gaze over Lily's head. As Lily drifted back to sleep in his arms, James felt something shift inside him. The desperate search for Chloe had consumed 20 years of his life, but now, holding her daughter, he understood it wasn't just about finding his sister anymore. It was about healing the wounds that had fractured their family, about creating something new from the ashes of the past. Sarah brought a blanket, carefully tucking it around them both. Her hand lingered on his shoulder, offering silent support. "I used to dream too," she admitted quietly, "about having a normal life, about not having to look over my shoulder, about giving Lily the stability I never had." "We'll make that happen," James promised. "All of it." She smiled sadly. The mighty James Parker, still trying to fix everything. Not everything, just what matters. He caught her hand as she withdrew it, his fingers brushing against Chloe's ring. "And you matter, Sarah. What you've done for them, for our family, I can never repay that." A look passed between them, charged with understanding and something more. Max, ever vigilant, wagged his tail softly. "You know," Sarah said, settling beside them on the couch, "Lily asked me once why she felt safe with Max the moment she met him. I told her some bonds transcend time and separation, like family." "Is that what we are?" James asked softly. "Family." Sarah's answer was interrupted by a notification on her secure phone. Her face paled as she read the message. "What is it?" "The bookstore," she whispered. "Chloe's gone. Someone tipped her off about the watchers. She left a message." Sarah's voice cracked. "She's calling in the network. All of it." James felt his chest tighten. What does that mean? "It means she's done running." Sarah showed him the screen. "She's going to expose everything. Every victim, every Victorupt official, every cover-up. She's had proof all along, waiting for the right moment. She'll get herself killed." "Not if we help her." Sarah's eyes held a fierce determination. "You wanted to know why I wore her ring? Because it reminds me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop hiding." Lily stirred in James's arms, her small face peaceful in sleep. Max pressed closer, his aged body somehow conveying both protection and purpose. In that moment, looking at this unlikely family unit they'd formed, James understood what had to be done. The time for careful investigation and quiet searching was over. If they were going to protect Chloe, protect all of them, they needed to step into the light and fight. "Then we fight together," he declared softly, careful not to wake Lily. "As a family." Sarah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. The rings his and Chloe's caught the dim light, no longer symbols of loss, but of a promise renewed. Max's tail thumped against the floor in apparent agreement, his loyal eyes reflecting the same determination they'd shown 20 years ago when he'd first tried to warn them about the darkness in their home. This time they would face that darkness together, not as broken individuals seeking answers, but as a family united in purpose. And maybe, just maybe, they would finally bring Chloe home. Dawn broke over the cabin with an ominous red glow. James stood at the window, phone in hand, reading the latest updates from his network. Each message painted a darker picture of what they faced. "They're moving fast," he muttered to Max, who hadn't left his post by the door. "3 judges have suddenly taken emergency leave. The police commissioner is holding a press conference about historical case reviews." Sarah emerged from the back room where Lily still slept. "They're trying to cover their tracks before Chloe can expose them." "That's not all." James showed her his tablet. "Look at this. My firm's major clients are being approached by competitors. Someone's trying to destroy my business infrastructure." "Your father's associates." Sarah's voice was grim. "They're dismantling everything you could use to help Chloe." Max suddenly lifted his head, ears forward. A moment later, they heard the distant sound of helicopter rotors. "Get Lily," James ordered, "already moving to gather their emergency supplies. We need to." His phone buzzed with an incoming video call, unknown number. Sarah gripped his arm as he answered. The face that appeared on screen was elderly but sharp, a man James recognized from his father's inner circle. William Blackwood, chief architect of the Parker family's legal fortress. "James, my boy," the old man's voice dripped with false warmth. "You're making quite a mess of things." "What do you want, William?" "To help, of course. Your father tasked me with protecting the family legacy. That includes protecting you from your own misguided pursuits." Sarah moved closer, her presence steadying. Max growled softly, sensing the tension. "My father's dead," James replied coldly. "His legacy deserves to die with him." "Ah, but you don't have all the facts." Blackwood's smile turned predatory. "Your sister, for instance. Did you know she tried to blackmail your father before she ran? Demanded money to keep quiet about certain family matters." "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask your new friend there. Ask her what really happened to the money Chloe took. Quite a substantial sum, as I recall." James felt Sarah stiffen beside him. "Sarah." "Don't," she whispered. "He's trying to divide us. That's how they work." "Tick-tock," Blackwood continued. "The helicopter overhead isn't the only one coming, but I'm authorized to make you an offer. Walk away now. Return to your life. We'll even restore your client base, ensure your firm's survival. And if I refuse, then we'll be forced to protect the Parker name by more decisive means, starting with that charming little bookstore in Portland." The threat was clear. James's hand tightened on the phone. "You go near my sister." "Your sister made her choice long ago. The question is, what choice will you make now?" The call ended abruptly. In the sudden silence, the helicopter sounded much closer. Sarah James turned to her, fighting to keep his voice steady. What was he talking about? What money? She met his gaze unflinchingly. "Chloe didn't blackmail anyone. She found your father's ledgers, proof of decades of bribes, payoffs, and worse. The money she took, it was meant for a judge who helped cover up 3 deaths at Parker Industries." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't my secret to tell. That money helped build the network, create safe houses for hundreds of women and children." From the bedroom came Lily's frightened voice, "Mommy." They rushed to find her clutching Mr. Whiskers, tears streaming down her face. "The bad men are coming, aren't they? Like in my dreams." Max was already by her side, his aged body somehow making him appear larger, more protective. The old dog's loyalty had never wavered, even as the world crumbled around them. Sarah gathered Lily close. "Yes, sweetheart, but we're not running this time." James looked at them, this makeshift family he'd found and lost and found again. Blackwood's threats echoed in his mind, but they were drowned out by a deeper truth. Some things were worth losing everything for. "No," he agreed. "We're not running." He pulled out a secure phone, one not connected to his normal networks. "It's time to call in our own reinforcements." Sarah's eyes widened as he dialed. Who? Remember what Mrs. Chen said about her daughter's partner? Detective Rivera wasn't just any cop. He was part of an FBI task force investigating corruption in family dynasties like ours. They'd been building a case for years. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. That's why he stayed close to the network. Exactly. And now James managed a grim smile as the call connected. Now we give them everything. Every document, every ledger, every piece of evidence Chloe gathered. We burn it all down. They'll come for us first, Sarah warned. Hard. Let them come, James knelt before Lily, who had stopped crying and was watching him with those eerily familiar eyes. You know what makes that ring magical, sweetheart? It's not the stone or the metal. It's the promise it represents that we protect our family, no matter what. Lily touched his ring, then Sarah's. Like Max protects us. Exactly like Max, the old dog's tail thumped at the mention of his name. And now it's our turn to protect others. The helicopter was directly overhead now, its searchlight sweeping the grounds. In the distance, they could hear vehicles approaching. The tunnels, Sarah asked, already moving to the hidden entrance they'd scouted earlier. No, James stood, decision made. They'll expect that. We go out the front, right through them. Let them see us. Let them chase us. While Chloe exposes everything, Sarah finished, understanding dawning. We're the distraction. More than that, James checked his phone. Rivera's response was immediate and clear. We're the bait. Every minute they spend chasing us is another minute for the FBI to move on the evidence. Lily, still holding Mr. Whiskers, squared her small shoulders. I'm not scared. That's because you're brave, just like your mother. Sarah hugged her close. Both your mothers. Max barked once, sharp and clear, a warning. The vehicles were close now. James looked at his unlikely family, Sarah, who had sacrificed everything to protect his sister's child, Lily, who carried Chloe's spirit in every smile, and Max, the faithful guardian who had never stopped believing. Together, he asked. Sarah took his hand, their rings catching the helicopter's searchlight. Together. They moved as one toward the front door, Max leading the way. Behind them, James's secure phone lit up with message after message, the evidence being received, warrants being issued, a web of corruption finally exposed to light. And somewhere in Portland, in a small bookstore that had harbored more secrets than books, Chloe Parker was preparing to tell her story to the world. The time for hiding was over. The time for justice had begun. The helicopter's searchlight painted harsh shadows across the cabin's front yard as James led his family toward their vehicle. Max moved ahead, his aged body somehow remembering its military training from years ago, scanning for threats. They were halfway to the car when the first black SUV burst through the tree line. Get down, James pulled Sarah and Lily behind him as headlights flooded the clearing. Max positioned himself in front, hackles raised, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. William Blackwood stepped out of the SUV, flanked by 4 men in tactical gear. His expensive suit looked out of place in the pre-dawn darkness. Really, James, the old man's voice carried across the yard, making us come all this way for this little family reunion. Stay behind me, James whispered to Sarah. To Blackwood, he called out, it's over, William. The FBI has everything. You mean those convenient little files your sister stole? Blackwood smiled coldly. Inadmissible. Stolen evidence, chain of custody broken. Surely you remember your law school basics. Not these files. James felt Sarah tense beside him. The ones your own people kept. 20 years of meticulous records, every bribe, every threat, every cover-up. My father wasn't the only one who liked to keep receipts. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Blackwood's face. That's right, James continued, slowly moving toward the car. Rivera's been building the case for years. All he needed was someone on the inside to verify it all. Someone with access to the Parker family records. You're bluffing. Am I? James pulled out his phone. Check your secure accounts, William. Check all those offshore holdings you managed for my father. How long before they freeze everything? Blackwood's hand trembled slightly as he checked his phone. His face went ashen. But the thing about corruption, James pressed on, is that it leaves a trail. Every dirty judge, every bought cop, every accident that got covered up, it's all there. And now it's all coming out. Kill them, Blackwood ordered sharply. Kill them all. The men raised their weapons, but Max was faster. The old dog launched himself at the nearest attacker with a ferocity that belied his age, sending the man sprawling. In the chaos that followed, James shoved Sarah and Lily toward the car. Run! Gunshots cracked through the night air. James felt a searing pain in his shoulder but kept moving. Max had created enough of a distraction, 2 men down, a third trying to fend off the enraged German shepherd. They reached the car just as another SUV roared into the clearing. "You don't understand what you're destroying," Blackwood shouted, his composure finally cracking. "Everything your father built." "My father built nothing," James roared back, positioning himself between the guns and his family. "He destroyed lives. He ruined families. He drove my sister away and made me complicit in his crimes." "He made you rich," Blackwood sneered. "Made you powerful." "He made me blind," James corrected. "But not anymore." The second SUV's doors flew open, but instead of more threats, Detective Rivera emerged with a team of FBI agents. But William Blackwood Rivera's voice carried clear authority. "You and your men are under arrest." "On what charges?" Blackwood laughed desperately. "You have nothing." "We have everything." Rivera held up a tablet, including your conversation with James just now. Conspiracy, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and that's just from the last 10 minutes. Max limped back to them, bloodied but unbowed. Lily reached for him immediately, burying her face in his fur. "You're hurt," Sarah whispered, noticing James's shoulder. "It's nothing," he assured her, though the pain was intensifying. "We need to." Freeze, one of Blackwood's remaining men, had circled behind them, gun trained on Lily. Nobody move. Time seemed to slow. James saw the man's finger tightening on the trigger, saw Sarah moving to shield Lily, saw Max, exhausted and injured, gathering himself for one final leap. But before any of them could move, a single shot rang out. The gunman crumpled, revealing a figure in the tree line. Even at a distance, even after 20 years, James would know that silhouette anywhere. Chloe breathed. She emerged from the shadows, her own weapon trained steadily on Blackwood. She looked different, harder, older, but her eyes were the same eyes that now watched him from Lily's face. "Hello, William," she said coldly. "Remember me?" Blackwood went very still. "Impossible. You're supposed to be dead? Running?" "Gone." She moved closer, each step deliberate. "I've been exactly where I needed to be. Gathering evidence, building cases, waiting for the moment when all your carefully constructed walls would crumble." Mummy Lily's small voice cut through the tension. Chloe's composure cracked, just for a moment. Her eyes met Sarah's, filled with gratitude and pain and love. "Yes, baby," she whispered, "but stay with Aunt Sarah for now. Mummy has to finish something." Max whined softly, torn between his original master and his current charges. 20 years of loyalty pulled him in both directions. "It's okay," old friend Chloe's voice softened. "You did good. You protected them when I couldn't." As FBI agents moved to secure Blackwood and his remaining men, James felt the weight of 2 decades begin to lift. His sister was alive. His niece was safe. The corrupt empire their father had built was crumbling. But as he watched Chloe being briefed by Rivera, saw how she carried herself like a soldier rather than the carefree girl he remembered, he realized that finding her had been only the beginning. In the chaos that followed the arrests, James found himself oddly frozen, watching Chloe interact with the FBI team with practiced efficiency. She was both familiar and foreign, his sister, yet a stranger. Max whined softly beside him, sensing his turmoil. "Go to her," old friend James whispered. "She needs you too." The aging dog looked up at him with wise eyes, then slowly made his way toward Chloe. His movement was stiff from the fight, but determined. When he reached her, he simply sat at her feet, just as he had done thousands of times in their youth. Chloe's professional demeanor cracked. She knelt, wrapping her arms around Max's neck, burying her face in his gray fur. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I left you." The dog's tail wagged slowly, 20 years of faithful waiting finally rewarded. Mummy Lily's voice trembled with uncertainty. She stood halfway between Sarah and Chloe, clutching Mr. Whiskers, her small frame taut with confusion and hope. Chloe lifted her head, tears streaming freely now. "Lily," she breathed. "My beautiful girl." But Lily didn't move. Instead, she pressed closer to Sarah, who had been her rock for 6 years. "You're the lady from my dreams," she said softly. "The one who's always running." "I was running to protect you," Chloe explained, her voice breaking. "To protect everyone I loved. You left me," the simple statement, delivered in a child's honest voice, cut through the night air like a knife. Sarah started, but James touched her arm gently. "Let them," he murmured. "They need this." Chloe stayed kneeling, Max a steady presence beside her. "You're right," she told Lily. "I did leave you. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I left you with the most loving, brave person I knew." She looked at Sarah with profound gratitude. "Someone who would protect you better than I could." "Aunt Sarah says the ring makes her brave," Lily said, touching the blue stone on Sarah's finger. "Is that why you gave it to her?" "I gave it to her because she promised to love you like her own," Chloe answered, "and because every time she looked at it, she would remember that someone was fighting to make the world safe for you." Max suddenly stood, moving to Lily's side. He nudged her gently toward Chloe, his aged wisdom understanding what they all needed. Lily took one hesitant step forward, then another. "Did you?" She clutched her bear tighter. "Did you think about me?" Every second of every day, Chloe's voice was raw with emotion. "I kept every picture Sarah sent, celebrated every birthday from afar, watched you grow through windows and photographs, wanting so badly to hold you, to tell you how much I love you." Something in her words reached Lily. The child moved forward suddenly, launching herself into her mother's arms. Chloe caught her, holding her close as they both cried. Max circled them protectively, his tail wagging with joy. The faithful guardian had finally brought his family back together. James felt Sarah's hand slip into his. "It's really over," she whispered. "The fighting is," he agreed. "The healing, that's just beginning." As if hearing him, Chloe looked up. Her eyes met his, and suddenly they were children again, before the abuse, before the fear, before the long years of separation. "James," she said simply, holding out one arm while keeping Lily close with the other. He moved without conscious thought, dropping to his knees beside them. The embrace was awkward, tear-filled, and perfect. "I tried to find you," he choked out. "For 20 years I never stopped." "I know," she cut him off. "I saw you. Every news article about your search, every foundation you started, every time you fought against the kind of corruption that drove me away. You were fighting him all along in your own way." Sarah started to step back, giving the sibling space, but both James and Lily reached for her. "Stay," Lily pleaded. "Your family too." Max barked in agreement, nudging Sarah forward until she joined their embrace. The old dog then settled beside them, his mission finally complete. "The ring," Chloe said suddenly, reaching for Sarah's hand. "You should have this back." "No," Sarah and Lily said simultaneously. "It's what made Aunt Sarah brave enough to protect us," Lily explained with a child's simple wisdom. "She needs it." Besides, James added softly, his hand finding Sarah's, "I think it's exactly where it belongs." The moment was interrupted by Rivera approaching quietly. "I hate to break this up, but we need to move. There'll be press soon, and we need to get everyone's statements while the evidence is fresh." Chloe nodded, years of operational training taking over. The bookstore is being secured as we speak. The network is safe. Everyone is being protected. See, Lily looked up at her mother. "No more running." "No more running," Chloe promised, touching her daughter's cheek. "But we have a lot of work to do, helping other people who are still scared and hiding." "We'll do it together," James said firmly. "All of us." Max barked again, making Lily giggle through her tears. "Yes, you too," old friend Chloe scratched his ears. "You've earned your retirement, but something tells me you're not quite ready to stop protecting this family." As they rose to face whatever came next, James looked at his unlikely family, his long-lost sister, his beautiful niece, the woman who had protected them both, and the faithful dog who had never lost hope. They were battered, scarred, and forever changed by the years apart. But they were together, and this time nothing would tear them apart. Like the unbreakable bond between family members, your subscription helps us keep sharing these powerful stories of love and redemption. Join our community, where every story reminds us that hope never dies and second chances are always possible. The safe room at the FBI field office felt sterile and cold, despite the agency's attempts at comfort. James sat watching Lily sleep on the small couch, her head resting in Chloe's lap, while Sarah gently stroked the child's hair. Max lay at their feet, his breathing labored after the night's exertion. "He's not doing well," Chloe whispered, noticing James's concerned gaze on the old dog. The fight took too much out of him. The veterinarian they'd called in had been clear Max's heart was failing. The stress of the confrontation, combined with his age and the injuries he'd sustained protecting them, had been too much. He held on. James's voice cracked. "All these years he held on until he found you." Max lifted his head slightly at the sound of their voices, his tail offering a weak thump against the floor. His eyes, though clouded with age, still held the same unwavering loyalty they'd shown for 20 years. Rivera entered quietly, carrying fresh coffee and a medical kit. "The vet's on her way back," he said softly. But it's just to make him comfortable," Sarah finished, her eyes filling with tears. Lily stirred in her sleep, clutching Mr. Whiskers tighter. Even in unconsciousness, she seemed to sense the heaviness in the room. "Remember when Dad said he was too big to keep?" Chloe asked suddenly, her free hand moving to scratch behind Max's ears. "You stood up to him. First time I ever saw you do that." James nodded, the memory vivid. "Said I'd leave home before I'd let him get rid of Max. Meant it too." He knew Chloe's voice was thick with emotion. "That's why he started being harder on you? He saw you were becoming strong like Mom." Max whined softly, trying to move closer to them despite his weakness. The effort seemed to drain what little energy he had left. "Easy, old friend." James knelt beside him. "You've done enough. More than enough." Sarah moved to join them on the floor, her medical training taking over as she checked Max's vitals. "His heart rate's irregular," she reported quietly. "He's in pain." The vet arrived then, her face grave as she examined Max. "We can make him comfortable," she confirmed their fears. "But he's shutting down. The kindest thing would be to help him go peacefully." No, Lily's small voice startled them all. She was awake, tears streaming down her face. "He can't leave. He just found us." Chloe pulled her daughter close. "Sweetheart, Max has been fighting so long, fighting to protect us, to keep us safe, to bring us back together." "But he's family," Lily sobbed. "You said family never leaves." The words hit them all hard. James felt his own tears falling as he gathered Lily into his arms. Sometimes he struggled to explain the bravest thing family can do is let go when it's time. Max, as if understanding, managed to lift his head one last time. His tail wagged weakly as he looked at each of them, in turn his family, finally reunited. He waited for this, Sarah realized, her voice breaking. He needed to see us all together. The vet prepared what was needed, her movements gentle and respectful. "Would you like a moment?" They gathered around Max, Lily still crying softly in James's arms. Chloe took one of the dog's paws in her hand, while Sarah stroked his grey muzzle. "Thank you," James whispered to his faithful friend, "for everything. For protecting Chloe when we were young. For staying with me when she had to leave. For finding Lily. For bringing us all back together." "You were the best guard dog ever," Lily added, reaching out to touch his fur, "the bravest and strongest." "You never gave up on us." Chloe's tears fell onto Max's fur. "Even when I had to leave you, you kept loving us. Kept hoping. Kept watching." Sarah's medical composure finally broke. "You knew, didn't you? All those times you acted strange around me and Lily, you knew who we really were." Max's tail thumped one last time, his eyes filled with a peace they hadn't seen in years. He looked at Lily, then at Chloe, and finally at James, as if making sure one last time that his family was safe. The vet moved forward quietly. "Are you ready?" They nodded, unable to speak. As she administered the injection, they held onto each other and onto Max, their tears falling freely now. "Go rest, old friend," James managed. "You've earned it." Max's breathing slowed, his body relaxing as the pain finally eased. His last conscious movement was to press his head against Lily's hand, a final gesture of protection and love. Then, surrounded by the family he had spent 20 years trying to reunite, Max slipped peacefully away. Lily's sobs broke the heavy silence. "He can't be gone. He was supposed to stay with us now that we're together." "He'll always be with us." Chloe pulled her daughter close. "In our hearts, in our memories, in every story we tell about how he helped bring us back together." James couldn't speak, his throat too tight with grief. Sarah's hand found his, offering silent support as they watched the profound bond between mother and daughter begin to heal, even in the midst of loss. Max lay still now, looking for all the world like he was simply sleeping. The lines of age and pain had smoothed from his face, leaving behind the noble guardian they had all loved. "He was more than a dog," Rivera said softly from the doorway. "He was a hero." They all nodded, knowing that no words could fully capture what Max had meant to their family. He had been their protector, their secret keeper, their unwavering hope that love would eventually triumph over fear. And in the end, he had succeeded. His family was together, safe and whole, even if their hearts were breaking as they said goodbye to the faithful friend who had made it all possible. In the quiet aftermath of Max's passing, as the FBI team respectfully removed his body, the full weight of 20 years of separation began to settle over the reunited family. They sat in a tight circle, each lost in their own memories and regrets. "I have something you should see," Chloe said finally, pulling a worn journal from her bag. "I've kept it since the night I left. Every day, every milestone, every time I saw you from afar, it's all here." James took the journal with trembling hands. The first entry was dated the night she disappeared. Dear James. Max knew I was leaving. He followed me to the bus stop, refusing to go back. It broke my heart to order him home, to watch him whimper as I walked away. But he had to stay to protect you, to give you something to hold on to. I pray someday you'll understand why I had to go. You watched us, James looked up, his voice hoarse. Chloe nodded, tears falling, from a distance. Every Christmas, every birthday, I saw you searching, building your company, fighting father's influence in your own way. I saw Max getting older, still waiting at the window every night. Why didn't you come to me? The pain in his voice was raw. I could have protected you. Could you? Chloe's response was gentle but firm. You were 22, James. Father controlled everything, your education, your career, your future. The night I left, she paused, gathering strength. The night I left, I found documents in his office, evidence of what he'd done to Mum. Sarah gasped softly. Their mother's accident had never been questioned officially. He killed her, Chloe continued, her voice barely a whisper, because she was gathering evidence against him, planning to take us away. When I confronted him, she touched her side unconsciously, where James knew an old scar lay hidden. The hospital records, Sarah spoke up. When you came to us for help. 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding. Lily, who had been silent since Max's passing, suddenly stood. He hurt you, like the bad men hurt the people you help at the bookstore. Yes, baby Chloe pulled her daughter close. That's why I had to hide you. Why I had to trust Aunt Sarah to keep you safe while I built the network, gathered evidence, protected others like us. James felt the weight of his ignorance crushing him. All those years working in his firm, building on his foundation, I was part of the problem. No, both Chloe and Sarah said simultaneously. You turned his weapons against him, Chloe insisted. Every pro bono case defending abuse victims, every shelter you funded, every corrupt judge you exposed, you were fighting him without even knowing it. But I should have known. Should have seen what he was doing to you, to Mum. Sarah reached for his hand. James, you were a victim too. The psychological abuse, the manipulation, the constant pressure to be worthy of the Parker name that was his way of controlling you. He used to say I was weak, James remembered, his voice distant. Not strong enough to run the family business. Every success had to be bigger, every victory more complete. Nothing was ever enough. Because he knew, Chloe said softly. He knew that if you ever saw your own strength, you'd be unstoppable. Like Mum. Lily moved to James's side, wrapping her small arms around him. You're not weak, Uncle James. Max knew it. That's why he stayed with you. The simple wisdom of a child broke something in James. He sobbed deep, racking cries that had been held back for 20 years. Chloe and Sarah moved to embrace him, forming a protective circle around their broken family. I missed so much, he choked out. Lily's birth, her first steps, the network you built, the lives you saved. I was looking so hard, but in all the wrong places. You were exactly where you needed to be, Chloe assured him. Building resources we could use, maintaining a position that kept Father's suspicions away from us. And Max, her voice broke. Max knew. He stayed to give you strength, to keep you fighting. He was the bridge, Sarah added softly. Between all of us, even at the end, he brought us together. Lily picked up Mr. Whiskers, studying the old bear thoughtfully. Is that why you left him with me, Mummy? To be my bridge to you? Yes, sweet girl, Chloe touched the bear's worn ear. He was my connection to Uncle James when we were little. Then he became your connection to me. James wiped his eyes, looking at the bear that had traveled such a long journey. Mum fixed his ear the night before the accident. She said some things are worth mending, no matter how broken they seem. Like us? Lily asked. Like us, Sarah confirmed, touching her ring, Chloe's ring that had become its own kind of bridge. They sat together in silence, each processing the depths of their wounds and the possibility of healing. Outside, dawn was breaking over a world forever changed. The empire their father built was crumbling, his secrets exposed to light. But in that quiet room, surrounded by the remnants of their past and the promise of their future, the Parker family was finally beginning to heal. Max had shown them the way, his unwavering loyalty lighting a path through 20 years of darkness. "We should do something," Lily said suddenly, "to remember Max and to help other people who are scared and hiding." Chloe hugged her daughter. "What do you have in mind, sweetheart?" "A place," Lily looked at each of them in turn. "Like your bookstore, Mummy, but bigger, where people can be safe and have dogs like Max to protect them and know they're not alone." James felt something stir in his chest, not healing, not yet, but the beginning of purpose. "The Max Foundation," he said softly, "for families who need a bridge to safety." They all nodded, understanding that this would be their way forward, not forgetting the past, but transforming its pain into protection for others, just as Max had protected them until his very last breath. The FBI's evidence room hummed with fluorescent lights as Rivera laid out decades of secrets on the steel table. James, Chloe, and Sarah sat facing the mountain of documents, while Lily slept in an adjacent office under agent supervision. "This goes deeper than any of you knew," Rivera began, pulling out a worn leather journal. "Mrs. Chen gave us this before they took her into protective custody. It was her daughter's, the real Sarah Matthews." Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the journal. "She never told me about this." "Because it wasn't just about helping abuse victims," Rivera continued. "The original Sarah Matthews was investigating a nationwide network. Human trafficking, money laundering, forced adoptions, all hidden behind legitimate family dynasties like the Parkers." James felt the blood drain from his face. "My father was a mid-level player," Rivera confirmed. "Powerful, yes, but ultimately just a cog in a bigger machine. The real power lay with people like William Blackwood fixers who connected these families, handled their problems, and made inconvenient people disappear." Chloe's breath caught. "Like Mom?" Rivera nodded grimly, pulling out a photograph that made them all gasp. Their mother, younger than they remembered, standing with the original Sarah Matthews outside a courthouse. "Elizabeth Parker wasn't just planning to leave your father," he explained. "She was working with us, gathering evidence, identifying victims. Sarah Matthews was her FBI handler." "That's why she died," James whispered. "Not just because she wanted to leave. Because she was close to exposing everything." Chloe finished, her voice hollow. "And I found her files that night. That's why, Father." "That's why he tried to kill you," Sarah completed softly. "You weren't just running from abuse, you were running with evidence that could bring down an entire criminal empire." James stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "All these years I've been working in that firm, handling cases, making connections. Was I helping them? Was I part of it?" "No," Rivera said firmly. "You were being watched, tested. They wanted to see if you'd follow your father's path. Every time you took a pro bono case, funded a shelter, or investigated corruption, you failed their test. That's why they kept you at arm's length from the real operation." "The money," Chloe added, pulling out an old USB drive. "The funds I took that night, it wasn't just Father's bribe money. It was seed funding for their next expansion. Taking it didn't just hurt him, it crippled their plans in 3 states." Sarah reached for the drive with shaking hands. "This is what you gave me to protect, what we used to build the network." "Blood money turned to good," Chloe confirmed. "Every penny went to helping other families escape, building safe houses, creating new identities. But it wasn't enough just to help people run. We had to stop them at the source." Rivera spread out more photos, familiar faces from James's business circles, judges he'd argued before, politicians who'd attended his fundraisers, all connected by invisible threads of corruption and crime. Your mother saw it, he said quietly. The pattern. How they groomed children from powerful families to take over, how they isolated and controlled anyone who might expose them. She wasn't just trying to save you too. She was trying to break the cycle. James sank back into his chair, memories realigning with brutal clarity. The internship's father insisted on, the social events, the right connections. He was presenting me to them, setting me up to take his place, Rivera confirmed. And when you resisted, when you showed the same streak of justice your mother had, they started watching you more closely. That's why finding Chloe became so impossible. They made sure every lead you followed led nowhere. But Max knew, Sarah said suddenly. That's why he acted so strangely around certain people, why he was so protective of Lily. He could sense who was connected to them. Dogs know, Chloe smiled sadly. That's why the network started using therapy dogs in safe houses. They can sense danger better than any security system. But Rivera pulled out one final document, a list of names, dates, and locations. This is everyone they've helped disappear over the past 30 years. Some were victims being hidden. Others were threats being eliminated. Your mother's name is on here, so is the real Sarah Matthews. And me, Chloe added quietly. Page 3. Caroline Parker terminated during escape attempt. They thought they'd killed me that night. By the time they realized I'd survived, the network had hidden me too well. James studied the list, recognizing too many names. Clients who'd suddenly dropped cases, witnesses who'd vanished before testifying, activists who'd gone silent. All part of a pattern he should have seen. What happens now? Sarah asked, her nurse's instinct for triage taking over. Now. Rivera stood, gathering the evidence. We move. The FBI has enough to start rolling up the entire operation. But we need you, all of you. Your mother's evidence, Chloe's documentation, James's insider knowledge of the legal framework they used, even your experience with the underground network. Sarah, together you can help us end this. It won't be safe, Chloe warned. They'll come after us harder than ever. Let them come, James said firmly. His mother's strength, he realized, had been in him all along, just as it was in Chloe, in Lily, in the fierce protective love that had driven them all. Max protected us until his last breath, Sarah added, touching her ring, the symbol of their complicated, unbreakable bond. Now it's our turn to protect others. Rivera nodded approvingly. Elizabeth Parker would be proud of you all. She saw this day coming, planted the seeds that would eventually expose everything. And now we finish what she started, Chloe completed, determination replacing the shadows in her eyes. They looked at each other, the broken pieces of a family forged in trauma, but strengthened by love, finally understanding the true scope of their mother's legacy and their own purpose. In the days following the explosive revelations, Rivera brought them to a secure FBI facility to review one final set of documents. This time they came from an unexpected source, their mother's private investigator. Elizabeth Parker didn't just die in an accident, Rivera explained, laying out surveillance photos. She was building a case, not just against your father, but against the entire network, and she had help from someone on the inside. He produced a letter, the handwriting instantly recognizable to both James and Chloe. Father's secretary. James breathed. Maria. She was more than that, Chloe said quietly. She was our real grandmother. So the revelation hit James like a physical blow. What? Mother's biological mother, Chloe explained. Given up for adoption as a baby during one of the network's earliest operations. She spent her entire life working her way into a position to protect her daughter, our mother, without ever being able to tell her the truth. Sarah, who had been studying the photographs, gasped softly. The resemblance. How did we not see it? Because we weren't supposed to, Rivera said. Maria Martinez spent 30 years documenting everything. Every transaction, every victim, every cover-up. She was the original source of the evidence your mother was gathering. James remembered Maria, always kind, always watching, slipping him cookies when his father wasn't looking. She disappeared right after Mother died. Father said she'd retired. She went underground, Rivera confirmed. Continued gathering evidence, protecting others like your mother. She's the one who helped set up the original escape network that Sarah's predecessor used. But is she? Chloe couldn't finish the question. Alive? Yes, Rivera smiled, and ready to meet her great-granddaughter when you're ready. Lily, who had been quietly petting Caesar in the corner, looked up. Another grandmother. One who's been protecting us all along, Sarah said softly, just like Max. James sank into a chair, overwhelmed. All these years, the secretary who seemed to know everything, who always looked at Mother with such sadness, who left Max's favorite treats in places he could find them, Chloe added. Who made sure I found those documents that night? She orchestrated my escape, didn't she? Rivera nodded. She couldn't save Elizabeth in time. She wasn't going to lose you too. The network, Sarah realized, it wasn't just random good people helping others. It was organized, planned. By a grandmother trying to protect generations of children from the fate she suffered, Rivera confirmed. Maria turned her pain into purpose, her loss into a mission. Sound familiar? They all looked at the Max Foundation logo on the wall, a silhouette of a German shepherd standing guard over a family. There's more, Rivera continued. Your father knew. Not about Maria being Elizabeth's mother, but about her documentation. That's why he had her watched, why he limited her access to the family. But he never realized she'd been 10 steps ahead of him the whole time. Like a chess game, James murmured. She sacrificed her chance to know her own daughter to protect her from afar. And then protected us, Chloe added. Through Mom, through the network, through Max. Through me, Sarah said quietly. The original Sarah Matthews was working with her, wasn't she? That's why Mrs. Chen trusted me with her identity, with Lily. Rivera produced one final document, a family tree, meticulously documented, showing generations of victims and survivors connected through Maria's careful planning. Your grandmother didn't just create an escape network, he explained. She created a legacy of protection. Every person she helped went on to help others. Every safe house became a link in a chain. Every story of survival became a blueprint for the next rescue. Lily moved to study the family tree, Caesar at her side. Like ripples in a pond, she said wisely. One good deed spreading out to help more people. Exactly, Chloe hugged her daughter. And now we're part of those ripples. James stood, decision made. I want to meet her. She's waiting, Rivera smiled. Has been for 20 years. Said she knew eventually the Parker children would figure it out. That Max would lead you to the truth. Max knew, Sarah realized. That's why he always lingered at Maria's office door, why he followed her home sometimes. Dogs know, Lily said, echoing Chloe's words from earlier. They can sense who's really family. As they prepared to leave, James noticed one last photo in the file, Maria, young and beautiful, holding baby Elizabeth. The love in her eyes was unmistakable, even through the pain of knowing she couldn't claim her as her own. We all thought we were alone, he said softly. Running, hiding, fighting in our separate ways. But we were being watched over all along. By a grandmother who turned her tragedy into triumph, Chloe agreed. By a mother who died trying to protect us, Sarah added. By Max, who never lost faith, Lily contributed. And now, Rivera concluded, by all of you. The Parker legacy isn't what your father built. It's what Maria and Elizabeth started, what Chloe continued, what you're all building together now. As they left the facility, heading to meet the grandmother they never knew they had, James felt pieces of his past shifting into new patterns. The story he thought he knew of loss and separation was transforming into something else, a tale of fierce love spanning generations, of protection offered from shadows, of family bonds stronger than any attempt to break them. Max had led them home in more ways than one. And somewhere James was sure his faithful friend was wagging his tail in approval. 1 year later, the old Parker mansion stood transformed. Where once imposing gates had kept secrets locked away, now welcoming gardens led to the newly established Max Foundation, a sanctuary for families escaping abuse and trafficking. James stood in what had been his father's study, now converted into a warm counseling space. Where portraits of stern-faced Parkers once hung, children's artwork brightened the walls. In the corner, a special memorial displayed Max's collar, alongside a photograph of the loyal dog with the young Chloe and James. The first group arrives tomorrow, Sarah said, entering with a stack of files. She'd left nursing to run the Foundation's medical program, her experience with the underground network proving invaluable. How many? 3 families. 2 from the trafficking ring we exposed in Boston. 1 from she hesitated. 1 from your father's old associates. James nodded grimly. The past year had seen the systematic dismantling of the criminal empire his father had served. Each revelation had brought new horrors, but also opportunities to help those who'd been trapped within it. A bark from the garden drew their attention. Through the window, they watched Lily playing with Caesar, the German Shepherd puppy they'd adopted from the Foundation's therapy dog program. The dog's protective instincts reminded them all of Max. She's doing better, Sarah observed. The nightmares are less frequent. Having Chloe here helps, James agreed. Having all of us together. As if summoned by their words, Chloe appeared in the garden, returned from another successful mission. The network she'd built now worked openly with law enforcement, using their expertise to identify and rescue victims. Lily spotted her mother and ran to her, Caesar bounding alongside. The sight of them together safe, happy, whole still made James's heart ache with gratitude. Uncle James, Lily called out, waving for him to join them. Caesar learned a new trick. He moved to join his family in the garden, noting how Sarah's hand slipped naturally into his. Their relationship had grown slowly, carefully, built on shared purpose and understanding. Watch, Lily commanded Caesar. Guard. The puppy immediately positioned himself between Lily and the garden gate, alert and protective, just like Max would have done. Good boy, Chloe praised, though her eyes were misty. They all still felt Max's absence keenly, especially in moments like these. The renovation team finished the East Wing, James reported, changing the subject. We can house up to 15 families now, with separate spaces for counseling and skill training. Mom would be proud, Chloe said softly. This place that caused so much pain transformed into a sanctuary. They had found their mother's old journals during the renovation, hidden in a wall cavity. The pages detailed not just the abuse she'd endured, but her dreams of turning the mansion into a haven for others seeking escape. Even in her darkest moments, Elizabeth Parker had planned for hope. The FBI called, Sarah added. They've located 3 more safe houses connected to Blackwood's operation. They want Chloe to consult on the rescue planning. I'll go tomorrow, Chloe nodded. After we welcome the new families, I want Lily to understand that this is what we do now. We help people find their way home. But like Max helped us, Lily asked, wise beyond her years. Exactly like Max, James knelt beside her. Remember what we said about his spirit. It lives in every dog who protects people, Lily recited, and in every person who helps others feel safe. Caesar barked as if in agreement, making them all smile. The therapy dog program is expanding, Sarah reported. 10 more dogs in training, all rescued from abuse themselves. There's something powerful about healing together. James watched as Lily showed Caesar around the garden, pointing out her favorite spots, just as Chloe used to do with Max. The puppy followed attentively, already devoted to his young charge. "I got another call," Chloe said quietly. "From Rivera. They've identified more children ones the network placed years ago, trying to protect them. Some want to find their birth families." "Like me?" Lily asked, returning to the adults. "No, sweetheart," Chloe hugged her. "You were never lost, just protected until it was safe to bring our family back together. And now we help protect other families," Lily stated proudly. "That's right," Sarah smiled. "That's what the Max Foundation is all about." They had debated what to name the foundation, but in the end it had been Lily's suggestion that felt right. Max had spent his life protecting his family, waiting faithfully for them to reunite. His legacy lived on in every life they helped rebuild. "The roses are blooming," James noticed suddenly. Their mother's garden, long neglected, had been one of the first things they restored. She always said roses could survive anything, grow back stronger after being cut down. "Like us," Chloe said softly, touching her daughter's hair. The sound of cars approaching signaled the arrival of their afternoon visitors. More survivors, more stories, more opportunities to help. Caesar's ears perked up, but his posture remained relaxed, sensing no threat. "Ready?" Sarah asked, her hand finding James's again. He looked at his assembled family, his sister, finally free to live openly, his niece, growing strong and compassionate Sarah, whose love had helped heal them all, and even Caesar, carrying on Max's protective legacy. "Ready," he confirmed. Together they moved to welcome new families into their sanctuary, knowing that each person they helped was another victory over the darkness that had once threatened to destroy them. Somewhere, James thought, Max was watching, his loyal heart content, knowing that his family was not only whole again, but had grown into something stronger and more beautiful than they could have imagined. The cycle of pain had been broken. The legacy of love lived on. 5 years after the Max Foundation's establishment, James stood at the podium during their annual fundraising gala. The ballroom, once a symbol of Parker privilege, now buzzed with survivors, supporters, and success stories. "When my sister Chloe disappeared 25 years ago," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed room, "I thought I'd lost everything. What I didn't realize was that sometimes we have to lose our way to find our true purpose." In the front row, Lily, now 12, sat between her two mothers. Chloe, who had become a renowned advocate for trafficking survivors, and Sarah, whose medical program had expanded to clinics nationwide. Their rings, the original pair that had helped bring them together, caught the light as they held hands. Caesar, now a fully grown therapy dog, lay at Lily's feet, his posture mirroring Max's protective stance from years ago. Behind them, a wall of photographs told their story: Max's memorial, newspaper headlines about the criminal network's collapse, and hundreds of families who'd found refuge at the foundation. 5 years ago. James continued, "We transformed this mansion from a prison of secrets into a sanctuary of hope. But the real transformation wasn't in the building, it was in us. In how we learned that family isn't just about blood or names, it's about the choices we make to protect and love each other." He glanced at the newest addition to their family, his and Sarah's 6-month-old daughter, Elena, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. They'd named her after his mother, Elizabeth, carrying forward a legacy of strength rather than shame. "The Max Foundation has helped over 300 families rebuild their lives," he reported, pride evident in his voice. "Our therapy dog program has placed 50 trained companions with survivors. The legal clinic has overturned dozens of unjust rulings and helped expose corruption in family courts across the country." Rivera, now retired from the FBI but still active on the foundation's board, nodded approvingly from his seat. The evidence they'd gathered had led to hundreds of arrests, dismantling not just the Parker empire, but an entire network of exploitation. "But numbers don't tell the real story," James continued. The real story is in every child who sleeps safely tonight, every parent who no longer lives in fear, every survivor who's found their voice and their strength. Lily stood then, right on cue, Caesar at her side. She'd insisted on speaking, wanting to share her own perspective on their journey. My story began with a dog named Max, she started clearly, her voice strong and sure. He protected our family until we could find our way back to each other. Now, every time we help another family, every time we place another therapy dog, his spirit lives on. In the years since Max's passing, Lily had become the heart of their mission. She worked with the therapy dogs, welcomed new families, and showed other children that trauma didn't have to define their future. The rings my mother's wear, she touched the matching bands on Chloe and Sarah's fingers, remind us that magic isn't about spells or wishes. It's about the power of promises kept, of love that never gives up, of hope that survives even the darkest times. Caesar pressed against her leg supportively as she continued, every family that comes here has their own Max something, or someone that helped them hold on. Find courage, keep believing in better days. We honor that spirit by creating safe spaces where healing can begin. James watched his niece with pride, seeing in her the best of them all: Chloe's resilience, Sarah's compassion, his mother's determination to transform pain into purpose. The foundation isn't just a place, Lily concluded. It's a promise that no one has to face darkness alone, that there's always hope, always a way forward, always people who will help you find your way home. As applause filled the room, James returned to the podium for the final announcement. Today, we're expanding that promise. Thanks to your support, the Max Foundation is opening 5 new locations across the country. Each one will offer comprehensive services: housing, legal aid, medical care, therapy, job training, and of course our signature therapy dog program. Photos appeared on the screen behind him, former mansions and estates, all seized from convicted traffickers and abusers, being transformed into sanctuaries. Every site will have a garden, he added, smiling at Lily, with roses that bloom even after being cut down. Because that's what survivors do, they bloom again, stronger and more beautiful than before. Caesar barked once, as if in agreement, making the audience chuckle. But there was profound truth in the sound, the echo of Max's faithful vigilance living on in each dog they trained, each family they helped protect. 25 years ago, James concluded, a scared teenager and her unborn child fled this house, protected by a network of brave souls who refused to let darkness win. Today we are all part of that network, all guardians of hope, all keepers of the promise that love is stronger than fear, that healing is possible. That family in all its forms is worth fighting for. As the gala continued around them, the family gathered in what had once been the mansion's darkest corner, his father's private study. Now it was filled with children's artwork, therapy dog certificates, and a special memorial to Max, complete with his collar and favorite toy. He'd be proud, Chloe said softly, touching the memorial. Not just of what we've built, but of who we've become. Sarah agreed, cradling Elena while Lily played with Caesar nearby. Every life we change, every family we help reunite, it all started with his loyalty. And Mom's courage, James added. And your strength, Chloe. And your love, Sarah. And Lily's wisdom. And your persistence, Lily chimed in, grinning. Even when you were looking in all the wrong places. They laughed together, the sound bright and healing in a room that had once held only secrets and fear. Outside, roses bloomed in Elizabeth's restored garden, their fragrance drifting in through open windows that had been shuttered for decades. This was their legacy now, not the Parker name or fortune, but the simple, powerful truth that love could transform any darkness into light, any wound into wisdom, any loss into hope. Max had shown them the way. They would spend the rest of their lives helping others find it too. The end. In life's twilight years, we often find ourselves reflecting on the paths we've walked, the love we've given, and the bonds that have shaped us. Like Max, the faithful companion who never lost hope through 20 years of separation, your presence in your family's life has been a beacon of unwavering devotion. Every smile you've shared, every sacrifice you've made, every moment of patience and understanding, these are the threads that have woven your family's tapestry of love. Just as the Parker family discovered that true strength lies not in wealth or power, but in the courage to protect and nurture those we love, your years of wisdom and care have built a legacy far more precious than any material inheritance. Like Max's protective spirit living on through Caesar, your values, your stories, and your love will continue to guide and protect future generations. Remember, like Elizabeth Parker's roses that bloom even after being cut down, your journey has planted seeds of resilience and love that will flourish long after you're gone. Every time your grandchildren share your stories, every time they demonstrate the values you've instilled, every time they show kindness and compassion to others, that's you blooming again through them. You are not just a parent or grandparent, you are the guardian of your family's heart, the keeper of its memories, and the foundation upon which future generations will build their own stories of love, courage, and hope. Your presence is a gift that makes every day brighter, every burden lighter, and every celebration more meaningful. Thank you for being our family's Max, our faithful protector, our unwavering support, our bridge across generations. Your love is the magic that makes our family whole. If this story of love, loyalty, and family bonds has touched your heart, we invite you to be part of our growing community. Like Max's unwavering dedication, your support helps us share more stories that remind us of life's most precious gifts. Please subscribe to our channel. Share this video with loved ones who need to hear this message of hope, and give us a thumbs up. Let us know in the comments how this story resonates with your own family experiences, perhaps about a faithful pet, a reconciliation, or the power of unconditional love. Together we can create a space where heartwarming stories continue to inspire and heal. Join our family by clicking subscribe. Every new subscriber helps us spread more stories of love and hope.